For centuries, we have modeled the brain as an isolated command center, sitting inside the skull and issuing top-down orders to a passive body. But if you follow the spinal cord down into the abdomen, you encounter the enteric nervous system, a neural network so dense and complex it operates as a secondary brain. Medical science has historically operated on Cartesian dualism, a philosophy that rigidly separates the mind from the physical body. We are now seeing that this separation is a biological fiction. This map illustrates the physical reality of the human system. The brain relies on the gut microbiome to sense the outside environment, receiving a continuous stream of chemical data and neural signals to determine its operational state. By deconstructing the ecology of the large intestine, we can map how microbes control neurological function and establish an evidence-based protocol to optimize our biological hardware. This research suggests a biological framework where many conditions historically labeled as isolated psychiatric disorders share a common systemic origin within the gut's immune environment. To understand this ecosystem, we have to move past the caloric model of nutrition. For 50 years, tracking the calorie as the primary metric of health has forced us to view complex biology through a lens of basic arithmetic. Treating food strictly as energy accelerated the widespread adoption of industrialized, ultra-processed products. This dietary transition directly correlates with the current surge in obesity, chronic depression, and neurodegeneration. These thousands of distinct chemical substrates function as data, utilized specifically to nourish and manage our internal microbial ecology. Optimizing human health requires abandoning macronutrient math in favor of complex ecosystem management. We are born with a sterile intestinal tract. In our early years, it becomes colonized by a randomized ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, and viruses, forming a distinct community in the lower colon. Organisms in your gut possess 200 times more genes than human cells, granting them immense metabolic versatility. Inside this environment, strains evolve specialized roles. One might remain dormant for years, waiting for compounds in a coffee bean, while another only consumes cabbage fiber. A low-diversity diet starves these specialized strains. This leaves unconsumed chemical waste sitting in the colon, which fuels the rapid overgrowth of pathogenic bugs. A healthy gut is defined by total ecological efficiency. Every chemical input is utilized by a specific microbe, leaving zero waste for harmful pathogens to consume. The vagus nerve acts as a high-speed fiber optic cable connecting the brain to neural sensors in the gut mucosa. As microbes break down fibers, they synthesize fatty acids. These trigger endocrine sensors, lighting up receptors that relay positive environmental data upward. Conversely, an overgrowth of pathogenic bugs produces hostile chemical byproducts. The nervous system detects this toxicity and immediately transmits a severe biological threat signal upward. The brain responds to this threat signal through evolutionary programming. Assuming an acute attack, it forces the system into an involuntary biological lockdown to conserve energy. This biological lockdown produces the exact fatigue and mood shifts we classify as depression, revealing a gastrointestinal driver for psychiatric symptoms. This microbial ecosystem spans the entire gastrointestinal tract, extending all the way to the mouth. Leftover food waste trapped between the teeth provides an ideal breeding ground for inflammatory pathogens. Without mechanical removal, pathogens construct thick biofilms known as plaque. They embed deeply into gum tissue, releasing microscopic inflammatory markers directly into the bloodstream. Epidemiological data correlates untreated periodontitis with a 25% increase in heart disease and significantly higher rates of cognitive decline. While vascular dementia involves restricted blood flow and Alzheimer's is characterized by specific protein folds, the progression of both conditions is accelerated by systemic, uncontrolled inflammation.
Regular oral hygiene functions as a neurological defense mechanism, preventing the chronic buildup of these inflammatory markers. Managing this internal ecosystem requires specific engineering parameters. The first is mindfulness, a deliberate cognitive pause to override the marketing of ultra-processed foods. The second is consuming 30 different plant varieties per week to prevent ecological monopolies. Parameter 3 is ingesting 3 fermented foods daily. Foods transformed by microbes like kefir, kimchi, or sauerkraut introduce diverse bacterial species that directly modulate the host's immune system. Clinical trial data out of Stanford University demonstrated that a diet high in these fermented foods led to a 25% reduction in systemic inflammation. Parameter 4 is diversified protein. Beans and pulses deliver essential amino acids encased within a natural fiber matrix, feeding your microbes and cells simultaneously. Parameter 5 dictates prioritizing food quality over caloric density. Evolutionary thermostats in the brain detect restrictive calorie counting and override it by permanently ramping up hunger signals, ensuring restrictive diets fail. This reframes every meal as the daily administration of chemical medicine for trillions of symbiotic organisms. Parameter 6 requires eliminating ultra-processed foods. These make up the majority of the modern diet and are heavily engineered from cheap, government-subsidized surplus crops. Their physical structures are destroyed during manufacturing, so they melt rapidly in the mouth. Combined with toxic emulsifiers and artificial sweeteners, they are engineered to bypass natural biological satiety signals. Parameter 7 focuses on polyphenol fuel. Deeply colored and slightly bitter plants provide defense compounds that act as high-grade fuel, maximizing microbial efficiency. Parameter 8 is time-restricted eating. The immediate morning meal was popularized by John Harvey Kellogg, overriding millions of years of evolutionary fasting rhythms. Fasting for 12 hours triggers a metabolic shift. A specialized microbial defense team activates, sweeping through to physically clean and repair the gut's mucosal barrier. Continuous dietary grazing interrupts this critical biological maintenance, leaving the gut lining damaged and the host's immune barrier compromised. When optimizing this ecosystem, isolating single variables fails. For instance, agricultural pesticides do interfere with microbial genetics. However, depriving your microbes of plant fiber entirely because you cannot access organic produce causes significantly more ecological damage. The universal directive to restrict sodium is similarly flawed. Only 1 in 5 people possess severe biological sensitivity to salt. For the remaining 80%, complete restriction yields negligible benefit. This chart illustrates the magnitude of that discrepancy. The minor blood pressure reduction achieved by cutting salt is eclipsed by the impact of consuming dietary potassium and beetroot, which are 3 times more effective at lowering pressure. Likewise, isolated synthetic supplements fail to integrate properly. Massive single doses of calcium frequently deposit into artery walls, driving atherosclerosis and restricting blood flow. This exposes the failure of biological reductionism. You cannot optimize a complex, interdependent ecosystem by injecting isolated synthetic chemicals. This human systems map shows the final architecture and operation. A highly diverse gut microbiome processes complex inputs, sending optimized data streams up the vagus nerve to maintain low systemic inflammation and high cognitive function. Human nutrition is an exercise in complex systems biology, moving past the limitations of simple arithmetic. By adhering to these engineering principles 80% of the time, the resulting ecological resilience is strong enough to absorb occasional processed inputs without causing systemic failure. True health requires abandoning the illusion of brain-body separation. Feed the microbiome, and the system optimizes itself.